This is Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Here are your hosts, Dr. Tim Slecker and Dr. Johnny Lupinacci, educated educators talking education.
Welcome. Good Friday. Busted Pencils. Well, not Good Friday yet for people celebrating Easter, but it's a great Friday because it's Friday. It's Busted Pencils. It's fully leaded education talk. Educated educators talking education. Yeah, Johnny, it's another week, man. I can't believe
And what a week, huh? Great guests,
Wow.
great show, awesome callers, amazing
Just
topics. You brought it up last Wednesday. You said, "Oh, you're the great connector," but you know what? I got to throw props out to our guests and our callers and just the conversation. It's just connecting all week long. I mean, the themes are just vibing with one another in a way that creates resonance and spark around this idea that here we are talking about what's working and not working in public education, but that underlying theme of no matter what, there's the responsibility that we all have. Dare we call it a civic duty? There's a
There you go.
responsibility we all have to chime it into the conversation, to being aware, to have good information about what's happening in our schools so that we can make them better. Because a better school system is a better community, is a stronger economy, is a better country. It just trickles up. Holy smokes, Tim, can it trickle up?
I was like, wait a minute, trickling up, man. I tell you that sounds like somebody's campaign speech this fall. Trickle up, I don't know, whatever it is, man. But yeah, great guest Alfie Cohn on Monday, Educators Amplified. Teacher Joanna, Teacher Hallie on Wednesdays, Thursday. Hey, Dr. Jillian Vasquez Helig came on to talk about. I mean, we talked about everything last night with Jillian. We started from his testimony in Congress with about charter schools and the reality versus the mythology. And when we talk about reality, the real peer-reviewed research and what the research says about, hey, charter schools, they're just not all they're cracked up to be. And there it is. In fact, Johnny, here we go. Right.
Well,
K-12. Well, you got something before I jump in here?
well, I just want to say, I think it was so cool what Julian shared with us on yesterday's show was that okay, maybe even we can find the case, and I'll remember I'll point to one really amazing school effort that I loved learning from that happened to be a charter school, and that was the Harlem Children's Zone in New York and Jeffrey, Canada. And it got blown out to this, hey, this is what charter schools can do. But the problem being, and Julian kind of laid that out there, that's not what they do. That's one case. And so if you're out there and you're like, hey, I know a charter school and it's really good, great. That's what all of our public schools could and should be. Right. And that's the argument. Instead of saying, here's what ought to be the standard for our public schools, let's make sure we have, if folks aren't familiar with the Harlem Children's Zone, you could look that up. It was this really great idea of let's get kids everything they need.
Right.
And let's make sure that they're taken care of all the way around, from access to quality pediatricians to dental care to all the things, because no matter who you are, if we invest in you when you're young, you are likely to do really amazing things when you're grown. That's the science. I'm gonna dumb down the science to everyday language. If we invest in youth when they're young, right, they tend to do really amazing things when they're grown. It's not rocket science. And Julian reminds us that what has happened with charter schools is it's taken money away from schools and put it into these private, let's hope they do good. And I'll tell you what, humans have great capacity to do good. Jeffrey, Canada, Harlem Children's Zone, awesome. But you know what? Not every corporation is actually caring about kids. And what happens is we also have great capacity as human beings to be kind of selfish and exploitive and make an industry opportunity out of this. And that's happened more often than not. And rather than dwell on that, our guy JVH, he came through and he said, I'll tell you what, we have proof that other less expensive things have, he said a few things, 400% increase likelihood
Increase.
to
Right.
lower
Right.
the class sizes. Dude, so he said we have actual research-backed interventions that if we chose legislatively to support those things, we would have way more difference in the outcomes than creating this choice, which really isn't creating choice. It's creating opportunity to make money off of kids and families.
Yeah, it's it moves kids into a place, as Jillian points out. Segregation, school segregation actually increases when you create the charter schools, not decreases. And
That's
so,
right.
Johnny, there it is. So K-12 dive today. Texas takes over charter school network following years long investigation. Texas has placed an 80,000 student charter school network under conservatorship following investigations into multiple allegations of, quote, financial and operational impropriety. The Texas Education Agency appointed 2 conservators to oversee and direct the charter system, IDEA, Idea Public Schools, in a settlement agreement reached with the state. There it is, Johnny.
Well, you know
Another,
what?
well,
Experiment
well,
gone. Experiment. Charter school experiment gone wrong, right?
there it
And
is.
Julian
And,
brought that up, right? He
Julian
said
brought this up.
New
Yeah.
Orleans. New Orleans is a
Mm.
great example. All these other places, Texas now today in this news, like what we do is instead of this ultimately becomes a government responsibility, even once it's been privatized. It's like it's more of a problem than it is a solution, right? And so it
Mhm.
ends up ultimately back in the hands, this conservatorship or whatever, sounds like to me, and I got to read it more closely. This is something you're sharing with me from today. But it sounds like to me it becomes the problem again of the state. So the
There it
state
is.
let go of this by opening up to charters, and then boom, they got it back on their plate rather than have just invested from the beginning on their public
Exactly.
education system, right?
And
Give
right
us a
now, this
call
was
though. Callers out
yeah,
there, 855-752-4842. Give us a call, man.
give us a call. Johnny, here's the deal too, in case anybody's wondering, what happened. Well, at a minimum right now, it looks like IDEA, Idea Charter School, has to pay back $28.7 million in federal grants that they took inappropriately to create this charter school network. And as you said, John, I like that connection there to the reality of going, okay, so when private fails, or private charter, whatever you want to say, it still ends up coming back on the bad government to fix. Or as we would have said, so $27 million, if we would have invested, it could have been in a position to say, reducing class sizes, as Jillian pointed out last night. You know what? Going back to early childcare again, recognizing that, hey, any type of universal pre-K has its ability to make things better. Yeah, the number's 855-752-4842, 855-752-4842. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. Johnny, charter schools, Texas, and it's the funny thing Jillian talked about, he actually had his beginnings there in Texas and looking
Yeah.
at that. And, we had Carol Burris on from the Network for Public Education to talk about some of the scandals in charter schools. And I actually saw this on the Twitter today. Diane Ravitch and Carol Burris, the Network for Public Education, tweeting out this story here coming out of the K-12 dive. Texas takes over a charter school network following years-long investigation. The little synopsis: after probing allegations of financial and operational impropriety, the Texas Education Agency is appointing conservators to oversee Idea Public Schools. There it is, Johnny. 855-752-4842. Hell, and that's what we had. We had Dr. Jillian Vasquez Helig on the show last night. But Monday, John, I want to swing back to Monday just to kind of recap there. We had a little bit of audio technical difficulty with our guest Alfie Cohn. Just to remind people, though, that this idea of cognitive load, we try really hard to make sure that this show is never jargoned and so that people get bogged down. We try to make it point out so that people can understand what we're talking about. Alfie
Right,
brought up
man,
though
so
this
that I
issue.
can follow it. Sometimes, I mean, I got a PhD in this stuff, and sometimes I'm like, "What? It's like, excuse me, can we just break it down? Okay,
And
let's just talk
yeah,
regular for a minute here."
talking regular. Alfie Kohn though says, "Hey, cognitive load. There's a theory out there that essentially, and we broke it down pretty good, which says, hey, there's only so much you can remember." And once you pass that stage of remembering, stop teaching to kids because they've reached the load of which they can't encompass or learn anymore. And Alfie kind of just really broke that down real hard and went, sorry, there's just not research that says that our human brains work like computer, memories where you fill it up to the point and then it can't take anymore. That doesn't happen. That doesn't mean that, sometimes things don't have to be broken down differently and presented in different ways with different opportunities for kids to learn. However, the idea that at some point you can overfill a person, maybe individually there are certain times where certain of us, and I feel like this sometimes, where I'm like, okay, I just can't hear, I can't listen anymore, my brain is taken enough. However, generalizing that out across a population and saying, so your group of 25 fifth graders, after 22 minutes of this kind of instruction, they will reach their cognitive load capacity, therefore stop. Nothing
Well,
like that exists. No
yeah.
research.
Yeah, and it's great because we can have an expert like Alfie Kohn, just an OG voice on this work. He's done so much work to debunk, the myth that we have to do all this testing or what, we have to, discipline kids in a particular way. His work has been, for decades about, turning to scientific evidence of what might strengthen learning. So, when we get back, we should dive a little bit more into Alfie. And then, Tim, there was a great story from Florida this week. You sent it to me, and I think we should
Oh
cover it.
yeah. Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
it's a highlight of the week for me in the news. So we'll come back with that too. So we'll tease that a little bit. Good news out of Florida.
Good news out of Florida. Hey, and just one of those things. It's Florida. A little hint. We heard that you can't say something in Florida. Well, that's just not true. It's
Let's
busted
go.
pencils. It's fully leaded. The number's 855-752-4842. Give us a call. Hey, see if anybody can call and give us that Florida story before we get back. Busted pencils,
Boom.
back in a break.
This is Matt Damon on Busted Pencils Radio. Please stop bothering me and just ask my mom already.
Oh, yeah. Nate is on the board.
Oh, he's got the
Black
sound
flag, busted pencils, fully leaded education talk.
And a little teaser before we jump into it.
Yeah,
Tim.
the number 855-752. What's that? Yeah.
752-4842. You can finish it up. So I was going to say a little teaser too.
Rise above.
Yeah, we had the rise above.
There you go.
All right, we're on some sort of weird lag where we're talking over each other back and forth, but I think we're evened up now. But we heard rise above, but also before that we heard Matt Damon say, don't ask him anymore, just ask his mom. And little teaser, that's exactly what we do here on Busted Pencils. We get lucky enough every so often. We have the great Dr. Nancy Carlson Page pop in, who, yes, she is Matt Damon's mom, but in addition to that phenomenal role she plays in his life, she is a phenomenal educator, a professor of education, and is extremely knowledgeable, especially about early childhood stuff. And we'll have her on soon. So another little teaser, but let's get back to it. We had Alfie on Monday, right? And so Alfie was talking about cognitive load theory, and you were explaining it again. And I just want to take a stab at breaking it down one more time. To me, Alfie's done this right before the break. I said it's like he's he's for decades debunked trends in educations. And what I mean by this is like firecracker solutions, like, hey, try this in schools, it's going to be better. And everybody should do it. And it catches like wildfire and it burns out really quickly. And it doesn't have a high return on learning. And one of those things he's debunking is cognitive load theory. And there's this purported idea coming out of education research that is not true. It's just being tried out. It's like an experiment that goes badly. But it's this idea that rather than explain and have children experimenting and sort of learning in through play or learning through being engaged in active learning or other kinds of things, there's this push that says don't overload them with too much. Give them the solution and a handout or a list of the steps on how to get there, and they'll know how to do the problem. Don't spend as much time actively learning it. Do explicit direct instruction. Give them the answer. Show them the steps that got to the answer, and let them rip. And what he said is, at best, we might remember or memorize that in the short term, but in the long term, that's a terrible way to learn. And the research shows that this does not hold true. So if you're out there listening and you hear like, hey, our district's trying out this cognitive load theory thing, or we're just going to give kids the solutions and have them have access to the answers, and that research shows that that's helpful. We had an OG researcher on Monday night who said, absolutely, that's not good learning science. That is not how children learn. And so don't believe the hype when it comes to cognitive load theory. I didn't like the name of it anyways. I heard cognitive load theory and I heard load of BS. So I sort of thought like, oh, I bet you I better read deeper. I read a little bit. Then we had the godfather of the critique on, right? So we had Alfie on to explain it. And now we know, listeners, and Tim, you and I know, like, cognitive load theory, kind of a load of what.
Yeah, actually a BS right there. That's for sure. That's where it always is. Oh, man. The number is 855-752-4842, 855-752-4842. It's Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk, educated educators talking education. All right, Johnny, cognitive load theory. I think we've given it enough time out there. The reality is that, man,
flushed it down the toilet.
When you're going to allow students the opportunity to play, learn, and dive deeply into stuff, let it happen. Because guess what? Everybody remembers the things you remember the most are the things that you enjoyed the most. And does anybody remember enjoying hardcore rote memorization? No. My dad, you know what though? We'll jump in. My dad though had a little bit of a challenge on that with me the next day. He said, I don't know, Timmy. I think, back in my day though, when we had to memorize things, I think it worked pretty good. And I said, Dad,
I think the misconception is we're not going against memorization here, because you have to memorize some things. Memorization is important. We're talking about if you want things to remain, and I think that's what you're alluding to, in long-term memory and translate to application, to actually to actually understand. Like, we can memorize states and capitals, but what good is that? And in fact, it doesn't generally stay in the brain unless we've engaged with like, oh, I'm going to these places, or here's what happens in those places, or here's how far away they are. And we engage in some kind of real connection to it. And I'll push against this. I don't know the science on this, but I think from my reading, it doesn't really matter whether you enjoy it or not. Like, the joy piece is kind of like, we can't all enjoy everything. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I love mathematics. I didn't really enjoy calc class, but I learned it and it was applied. And so there's things that we can do when we're doing the learning that involve memorizing, but don't stop there. Connection to meaning and experimenting with it and making mistakes and having dialogue and conversation around things is where it then begins to translate into long-term memory recall and into application. And that should always be the goal.
Yeah. What you said, it's not just about joy. In fact, what you were talking about there is interest, engaging, deep, even complicated can be incredibly powerful for learning. The reality is what we're talking about is direct memorization instruction. And I said, you know what, Dad, I know what you're talking about because he went, because you mean to tell me that when I memorized my multiplication facts, that wasn't worth the time? And I was like, no, that's not what we were saying, Dad. We weren't talking about that. So yes, if you memorized all your multiplication facts out there, that's great. I'm glad that you're still using them. That really wasn't what we were talking about. We're just talking about.
And in the mathematics, I'm partial to this, right? Math teacher here. I'm biased. You often do gain some skills that scaffold up, and you memorize things that you're applying, right? So you learn the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, and then you do them in a bunch of different contexts for like the next 12 years of your education. And ideally, this is where I'm always like, come on, we got to do a little bit more, math teachers. Ideally, connecting that to where that is also occurring in day-to-day life and in our professional identities. Like, so where are you going to use what multiplication scaffolds into if you're going to be an artist, if you're doing like a mural artist, right? Has to scale up. There's all kinds of different applications, but your dad, and I'll pick on him, and I'm glad that he pushed on this because he's not wrong. When we memorize things that we're going to need to apply and they get applied, then they stay with us. But we needed that foundation. We needed to understand both why and what so that we could apply it.
There it is. Well, you know, Johnny, I think my dad, if you're listening out there, give Johnny a call. Give him a call.
Learning your multiplications.
855-752-4842. Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. We are the educated educators talking education. Yeah, Florida though, Johnny, we teased it. We're going to come back with it. We're going to get back to that story.
I'll say it. Good news doesn't often come out of Florida.
Good news rarely comes out of Florida, and when it does, man, hey, be the first caller. Call us 855-752-4842. If you know the story we're talking about before we talk about it, free Busted Pencils t-shirt will be in the mail. Busted Pencils, back in a break.
Get it.
Rise above, rise above, we're gonna rise above, we're gonna rise above, we're gonna rise above.
Hey, this is Tim from Rise Against here on Busted Pencils Radio.
It kills me not to know this, but I've all but just forgotten what the color of her eyes were and her scars or how she
we'll never forget your eye color. It's Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. The number's 855-752-4842. Give us a call, 855-752-4842. I'll give maybe a little bit of time here just for the potential. We were pitching and saying, if you know the story we're about to expose or put forth coming out of Florida, it's a surprising story. You still have time, 855-752-4842. The reason we point to Florida is that over the past 2 years, there have been more and more attempts through the state government, through the governor, to try to kind of silence, let's be honest, to silence teachers.
What's happening around the country, right? But Florida has, picked up a reputation for particular political leaders that have championed that kind of silencing. But yeah, we generally have been pretty hard on Florida, and we've always thrown the caveat out there because we know some great educators down there who are like, good teachers gonna do good teaching, but it's become harder and more threatening for them to do that, especially since there was a bill passed, right? That was often being referred to. I guess we're really teetering.
Yeah, you might as well
talking about it. I mean, we're Johnny, talking about. We won't give the story yet, but out of Florida, primarily this story that we are talking about that dropped this week is, there was a court case sort of responding to what we've talked about for a while, is the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, where teachers cannot talk about LGBTQ related topics, characters in books. There was this real sort of ambiguous ban law on discussing something that we all know as people who work with diverse young people and live in community with folks, that, you know what, there are a lot of different ways that we experience love, desire, attraction, and to simply reduce that to, either ors, or straight or not
Mm-hmm.
straight is really problematic. And young people are reminding us of this all the time, everywhere. So it's been really something that educators have been front lines on and saying, how do we best support young people learning about themselves with one another and in community? And there's been an attack on that. And so we have
Mm-hmm.
this story coming out of Florida where we had legislation over the last few years and laws passed that say, you can't talk about sexuality in classrooms. You can't talk about gender in classrooms. Well, there was a court case. Tim, spill the
There,
news on the
there you
on
go. So yeah, out of CNN headline: Florida teachers can, that's can, not cannot. Florida teachers can discuss sexuality and gender identity in some classroom settings. Legal settlement clarifies. And so, quoting from the article, Florida education officials and a group of LGBTQ advocates and families have reached a legal settlement that clarifies the scope of a statute referred to by critics as the Don't Say Gay law, spelling out that students and teachers are allowed to discuss sexual orientation and
Hold up,
gender
Tim. Can you
identity.
say that? Can you say that again? Say that
Yeah,
last part again one more
there you go.
time for everybody in the back.
Students and teachers are allowed to discuss sexual orientation and gender identity in classrooms as long as it's not part of formal instruction. Now, some people may go, well, wait a minute. So you can't teach about sexuality? Is that kind of the nuance there? Well, let's not get too deep in that right now because there could be this, but LGBTQ advocates are hailing this as this is a positive outcome to have this ruled because what was happening, Johnny, the interpretation of the Don't Say Gay law is that any time in any public school, if students would happen to bring up the topic around sexual identity, gender, things like that, that teachers were being told that you do not talk with them about that. In fact, even some teachers were being told, make them stop talking because we're not allowed to say gay in our schools, in our hallways. And students, you're not allowed to discuss that. And students, don't you dare ask teachers. And teachers, if any of those students ask you a question about sexual identity or gender identity, you just tell them, sorry, can't talk about that here. That's just not the truth. The reality is, and I'll just reemphasize that again, Johnny, students and teachers are allowed to discuss sexual orientation and gender identity in classrooms as long as it's not part of formal instruction. Break that one down though too a little bit, potentially saying not formal
Yeah.
instruction. So the reality there is that, so Johnny, you're teaching calculus, right? Okay. When you're teaching calculus, you can't teach gender identity while you're teaching calculus. That's the formal instruction they're talking about.
Well,
So when a teacher is just, in that setting, I I developed a lesson on calculus. Let's do or American history. I'm following the state standards. And the idea here is that I shouldn't deviate from the curriculum plan to be talking about that. I don't want to insert gender identity, sexual orientation into that discussion if it's not part of the formal instruction. That's the way I'm hearing that. You
I'm,
got a little bit of a doubt.
yeah, I kind of, Tim. What I'll say is this: first of all, this is one step on a long road. And there are attacks all across the country. We've said a little tidbit on Civics 101. Education is a state right. So state
Mhm.
legislations have sort of jurisdiction of formal curriculum in schools. So basically, in a nutshell, what gets taught at certain grade levels, what are the expectations, and what are happening in the schools state by state can differ because state education is a state right. So there are
Mhm.
states who politicians have championed attacks on young people and attacks on diverse people, especially the LGBTQ community, on trans community, on
Mhm.
this just healthy gender development for young people. Even, and this goes against best practice knowledge coming from pediatricians, from psychologists, from what we often talk about on this show, scientific consensus. This does not follow those legislative attacks on children, don't follow information about healthy development around
Right.
the world that we have.
Mhm.
So they might follow particular political beliefs, that primarily political beliefs that are really blurred between church and state. So what you have is that you have a really conservative, I will almost call it radical conservative, right?
Very radical.
Attack on children. And then one way to do that is to say, like, to put these kinds of scary laws into legislation that say, teachers, you better not acknowledge that a student may have a different gender, right? They may
Mm.
have been misgendered, and they're telling you this is how they identify. Well, you can't acknowledge that, right?
Mhm.
You can't discuss it. You can't talk about these things in your classroom. And dare you say you can't talk about anything about anybody maybe being gay or anything like that. But what I'll tell you is what I read the law to say is that
Mhm.
what I can't do as a teacher is scrap the state curriculum and replace it with something like, I'm going to say, for 2 weeks, I'm just teaching about gender, unless my class is
Okay.
gender and
Right.
identity, right? And so there's some nuances this, but as a calculus teacher, and I'm glad you brought that up, I can very much so say, Elliot threw the ball at this trajectory. Right?
Okay. There you go.
Use examples. I can include LGBT community representation in my
Mm.
story problems in my classroom. I can also acknowledge the people in my classroom for the great people they are. So if somebody is
Absolutely.
misgendered at birth, and they're coming to my classroom and saying, "Hey, Mr. L, I am Elliot. Just call me Elliot. My
Mhm.
pronouns are the are they, them." And I say,
Mhm.
"Awesome, Elliot. Glad to have you in class today." There is no law that can stop me from doing that, or from, if students are talking about, they say, well, we can't talk about trans. What is transgender? I could say, we don't use terms in here that we don't know about. So let's get those definitions straight, get them going. I probably shouldn't say straight. That's not really. Let's get them.
Yeah.
Let's get them correct, right? And let's
Right.
roll with it. So it's just that I can't scrap the curriculum and make
Right.
this. And that's a myth that radical conservatives have thrown out there, is that
There you go. Yeah.
these liberal teachers aren't going to teach. They're just going to teach their
They're
ideas
gonna
and agendas. No, we're going to meet kids where they are, respect them for the human beings that they are, and acknowledge them in representation, both in the content and in their physical presence in our classroom, as valued members of our community, regardless of how they gender, right? And
there
so
you
that, or their sexuality. And guess what? Kids developing in different spaces are going to talk about
Yeah,
their
they are.
identities with one another, and we can have those conversations with them. So,
There you
boom,
yeah.
big step in Florida. Good job, Florida educators who pushed hard to make this a problem for the legislation, and a victory, right? A step forward.
Big victory. I'd say, like, right now too, and for all of those other states, of which there are many out there trying or tried to, and in fact have put very similar laws in place. Let's go. Your civic duty is to step up now also. Use Florida as the lead and challenge this. As Dr. Lupinacci just said, man, check it out. Like, even in a calculus problem, the recognition and making sure that the inclusion that can be there, yes, you can still do that in calculus, even at the same time. LA Tom, though, is on the line, Johnny. We knew we'd get those phones working. LA Tom, what's happening, our friend?
Hey guys, first off, we the people ultimately are the government, and we must never forget that.
Always.
Second, we must fight to get money out of politics. That is the problem. That is the problem in most of our things, is the greed of money. What I'd like to say is this. First off, someone made a comment, and I thought it was pretty cool, is what is the big deal to all these people just to honestly say to someone, what are your pronouns? It's not a big deal. It's
Nope,
not
not.
something that's harming you or anything. What
right.
pronouns do you go by? It's not a big deal, and it doesn't hurt anybody. So
it doesn't.
that should not even be an issue, except for people that are already worried about their own orientation or their own problems, I guess, in life, or they want to be above someone else. Here's my other question that I've had all week long. It's just been really kind of eating at me because I have a little girl who's she's kind of like a niece, and she was talking last week to me, and we're kind of going on about how school going and everything like that. And she's 7, and this girl called her fat. And she said, well, and I think I am fat. And it's like, no, you're not fat of any kind at all. And this little girl has her own issues, more than likely about her own self. And that's usually what reflects upon when someone says something. It usually tells more about them than it does about you. Knowing that as a young gay kid growing up. But my question is this. We learn older, we learn later in life, like healing the inner child. And we talk about, doing positive talk or doing affirmations. What if we started those affirmations when kids, before they ever get to the point of being adults? What if we started those affirmations at a younger age for kids? Would that start to build that positive self-esteem and that positive self-talk? So they don't have to go their whole life where they're saying negative self-talk to themselves. And I'm not talking about in a selfish type of love way. I'm talking about in an agape type of love. Where they actually are a good person and they help other people in their community, in their democracy, what have you. So I just want to get your guys' take on that. If positive affirmations is something that maybe kids should be learning at a very young age when they can read, rather than wait until they're later in life and healing inner child that should have been healed maybe when they were children.
L.A. Tom, loving the question there.
Back,
we're going to get back, though. We're going to have to go after that one, Johnny Lupinacci. Positive affirmations. Well, I got to say this about positive affirmations. I do them every morning myself. I don't know. It seems like they're not doing anything problem, Johnny.
When we get back, we'll jump into it. Tim, we're too close to break to get into it. But I want to respond because L.A. Tom is not like his hunch is really aligned with some research out there. And so we'll come back with what those affirmations can do.
Busted Pencils, back in a minute.
You can't feel the heat until you hold your hand over the flame.
Ah, come on. Sometimes you can feel it, sometimes just looking at it. It's Busted Pencils, fully leaded education talk. The number 855-752-4842. 855-752-4842. Lots of stuff going on tonight.
Oh man, yeah.
Kind of rehashing, but Johnny, big story as you pointed out, coming out of Florida. Don't say gay. Hold on. Yes, you can. But L.A. Tom gave us a call and jumped in there. He wanted to know about the potential of teaching students at a young age positive affirmations and whether that would be helpful. You look like you got something there.
Yeah, he brought up two things, and I wanted to hear him out because he was sharing really good stuff. The first thing he said, why not just ask pronouns? I'm with you, Tom. It's that simple. Also, you said it doesn't hurt anybody. No, it doesn't hurt anybody. And you know what? We have evidence it actually helps people. So by golly,
there you go.
Just do it, right? If we don't know someone's name or we're not sure on how they assign pronoun to it, just ask, right? That's what young people have taught us. That's what everyone, like, you can actually help people by doing that. The other thing is, before we get to our caller on the line here, I am not like a mental health expert, right? But my expertise is around teaching and teachers, and we're around a lot of mental health experts all the time. And so by tangent, we do learn a lot about child development. So I'll throw that disclaimer out there that I'll let you know when I'm an expert. We all know I got that hubris down, but I'm not an expert on this. But what I'll say is what Tom is talking about is actually really important. So good teachers, we learn this. that it is so important. You spend as an adult in children's lives, you spend a significant amount of time around them. And teacher Joanna and teacher Hallie probably can talk about this
Mhm.
when they join the show too. But Educators Amplified always talk about being a regulated adult around children. Part of that is because if you follow the research around like attachment theory, and LA Tom brought this up about we are working all the time to heal inner childhood wounds. What if we
Mhm.
had a lot of affirmation as young people? Well, by golly, that's exactly what good teachers are learning to do, to model secure attachments, to model a regulated adult who sees them as valued, sees them as
There you
young
go.
people who have bright futures, who have a lot of promise, who are doing good hard work, even when they're making mistakes, who are there day in and day out, being honest with them, being trustworthy, and modeling secure attachments for them that extend beyond familial or partnership, attachments that say, hey, there are grown-ups that care about one another. And this is what it looks like. And this is what it sounds like. And so we practice filling young people with positive affirmations because LA Tom is absolutely right that
Mhm.
that kind of work can be a strong positive voice that carries with them into
Mm.
their lives and can do a whole lot of help if they're not getting that outside of school or if they're getting negative, traumas from either peers or, sadly from adults in their lives. So
Well,
teachers
the
can do that work and it's really important.
the way you say that, Johnny, I mean, here again, guess what? Positive. Even, the reality is it's only going to help. It's never going to hurt to say in
But
that
Tim,
positive.
I will say this too. I'm always skeptical because you can only fit so much into a show. It's more than just positive because some
Oh, I
positivity
know,
is just
right.
flat out toxic
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's
yeah.
BS and kids read through it. It's that day in and day out recognizing and seeing value in somebody and making sure that they genuinely know it and believe it because you're being honest with them. Because I know a lot of fake teachers out there. Hey, good work
You know
on
what?
this. It looks down
That
there like
may
it's
you
terrible
made
work. That's
you made me
crazy.
think actually, yeah, instead of genuine affirmations, genuine. I
Yes.
love that word. Oh,
Modeling
let's check out
secure
the caller.
attachment.
Yeah, genuine, genuine, genuine. Joanne from Madison. Joanne, what's happening, our friend?
What's up?
Yes, I was wondering about the kind of stress, the type of trauma that a student would feel if that don't say gay law would have been kept in place, and at any time his or her or their student, a teacher could be hauled off, or
Wow.
even worse, that person could feel guilty because um, uh, the student could feel guilty because he, she, they somehow participated in the events that led to that person being hauled off. I mean, how traumatizing divorce is for students. I mean, I would think that having a teacher removed from the classroom would be just as traumatizing. I'm so happy
Mm.
that Florida has done what it's done to get rid of that legislation, and I'm just hoping other states do something to lower the temperature in the classroom, to increase stress. And I love L.A. Tom's notions of being providing these wonderful affirmations as one way again for having positivity in the classroom reign instead of negativity. Great discussion.
So just
Thank
a
you,
quick
Joanne.
thank you, Joanne. Just a quick clarification too for we're giving Florida a lot of credit. They didn't get rid of the law.
Yeah,
There's just
right.
an interpretation that's being pushed out that says you can't actually ban discussions and conversations around this for the benefit of the class and whatnot. So it is a step in the right direction. It's a long road to getting rid of it, but it's
Mhm.
being interpreted in a particular way that does allow for some more healthy discussions and things in classroom. And the other thing is I won't speak for the LGBTQ community, right? But I'll just say on behalf, schools have been dangerous places for so many people for so long that
Yeah.
what you said, Joanne, about imagine that trauma. I sadly know that too many students lived that trauma over and over again in schools. And all that good teachers and good school leaders and advocates from all kinds of diverse communities are saying is, can't we just already get to a place where school doesn't have to be so damn violent and
Yeah.
anti so many people? Right. So it is a process. It is a process. And to my knowledge, no teachers got hauled off, but still kids are getting hauled out
Yeah.
regularly, and so there
Yeah.
is a lot of trauma in schools. And again, back to that, Tim, that option that Educators Amplify brought to us on Wednesday, say, we always have this either or, like schools are safe places or they're
Right.
not
There
safe
you
places.
go.
What if we just envisioned them to be great places for all of our students? And that's the kind of thing that I hope we can get to. Positive affirmations that are genuine and spaces of learning that are safe and meaningful for all children.
Let's not envision it, man. Let's do it. Let's do it, man. There is no need to be envisioning what's right, what's good for kids, what's good for adults, what's good for community. That's what we do here, though. Every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Busted Pencils, man. We bring it to you to recognize and understand public education. It's the foundation of American democracy. It is what happens in your schools, happens in the community. You want teachers to be able to do what's best for your kids, then make sure that it happens. Check us out next week. Busted Pencils. See y'all on Monday.